Slideshow. I'm beginning. All right, you have the mic. It is right in front of you, right here. I don't think you need to carry it around. Generally, I don't need to.
Oh, you don't?
If you want
Okay,
to,
that's
but
fine.
just letting you know that's where it is.
Okay.
All right, the thing's recording. You can see how loud it is and how easy it is for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
All right, everybody. Thank you for giving me your homeworks. I really appreciate it. All right, this is Dennis Lancaster. He is the head of honors. He is going to talk to you guys today about ethics. Please take notes. I encourage you strongly to take notes. We're also recording this for the few people who are not here, who are not going to be able to take notes, so that they will also be able to take notes later on their own time. All right, but it's also being recorded so that if you miss something, you can always look it up. It's under Dennis Lancaster's ethics lecture on home card. It's under integrity where all the other lectures are. All right. Questions before I go and sit in the back and start taking notes with you? Okay, then I'm going to the back and sitting in the back and taking notes with you. Good.
All right. I need no names. Not that I'll remember them. I don't see them. And Kelsey? Chelsea. Chris. Jordan. Jackie. Rebecca. Olivia. Kate. Sean. Alexis. Kate. Morgan. Logan. I'm sorry. Logan. I'm also deaf. Especially today. Charlene. Okay. Morgan. Here's Morgan. Hey, I knew there was a Morgan. Here's the Brianna. Well, my name is Dennis. And you may call me Dennis. I see this in my honors class. That's fine. Just call me Dennis. Doesn't bother me. Talk about ethics today. And I'm kind of passionate about this particular subject. Just to give you an idea of where this kind of came up in my academic career, my undergrad is in literature. I double majored in literature and in philosophy. Ethics is a part of philosophy. It's about thinking, okay? And philosophy is essentially focused on this idea of thinking. But ethics is a subgroup there, and we'll talk about exactly what that might be. My grad program, though, in journalism was partly focused on ethics and journalism, and that may sound like an oxymoron to you in that, how could that sort of absurd idea? But it is. It's a thing that in terms of the media, there's some things that are come up for you if you're going to be a journalist, that you have to make a decision about what's right or wrong. What's the best way of handling this for you? And there will be dilemmas. And a dilemma here, just to be kind of clear, is something where you can either have a good or a good choice. In other words, each of those goods, those things, may be equal. So which one do I choose? So if you like pizza, and so you have a choice. Now, this may not be an ethical dilemma, but if you have pepperoni and Canadian bacon and cheese or something like that. So if you liked each of those equally, which one do you choose? So some people might be a little stymied by that. And that's just a little thing. The ones where we talk about dilemmas, wait a minute. Dilemmas, it would be where you have a lot of negative. If I do this, I go to jail. If I do this, I save a life. If I do this, then whatever. Okay? That has negative consequences. So it becomes a dilemma. What is it that I do? So how would we typically deal with those dilemmas? You guys have to talk to me. How would you do? Just talk to that. How would you deal with that?
On pizza?
No. The negative stuff. Yeah. Which ones? And how do you decide that? No. No, you're good. Typically, we would. I mean, it's a sense of, how do I see this? What have my experiences told me about what to do here? But the problem is that's a very subjective point of view. And if we're talking about how, in an educated way of dealing with these kinds of choices, is there a better way? For many of you sitting here, if I said, is there an absolute right? Most of you would probably say, no. Why? Is there an absolute right?
I believe there is, but it's a matter of a lot of opinions.
we might say there's an absolute right to me, but others would say no, wait a second, that's only your view. That's your opinion. We wrestle with this because we really truly want to know. I think we want to know the truth, and we want to know what's right. Those are intertwined. We want to know the truth, and we want to know what's right. Whether it's for our lives, or whether it's for somebody around us, whether our society, or whatever it might be. We want to know that. But then we have all of these different views and these opinions. Part of what ethics does is try to give us ways of thinking about what's right or wrong. I guess I need to do this. There you go. Whoops. I didn't know I had. Ooh. I have an old presentation that had that stuff on it. So our definition, our working definition here of ethics for us today, that ethics are ways of thinking about what's right and wrong, good or bad, and just or unjust. Now, notice this does not say, what does this not say? What does that definition not say?
Black and white?
It doesn't, well, no, it sort of.
Doesn't include an opinion.
No, it doesn't include opinion. Opinion's not up there. It's not opinions about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. It's about ways of thinking. So if we can get to this idea of ways of thinking, our philosophy, ideas of philosophy, critical thinking, ways of thinking, then it's more methodical way of looking at particular dilemmas, different questions that we might have. Not just an opinion, not just a gut reaction, because you can be just dead wrong, and dead may be the right word. Okay, by choosing a particular thing. So this becomes very, very important. Ways of thinking. Now, the other part, it says, though, that there are multiple ways of thinking, so then maybe we do get into the opinion. Okay, so there are multiple ways of doing this. A deeper discussion the other time, come see me. We can talk about more along the lines of an absolute right or wrong. It has really nothing to do with maybe religion, as some of you might be wanting to jump to. It does and it doesn't. Okay, and I'll maybe explain that a little bit more in just a minute. Okay, so our working definition here are ways of thinking about what's right and wrong, good or bad, and just or unjust. And so here, this idea of right and wrong, what's right, what's wrong? Well, that's pretty subjective, isn't it? Good or bad? What do you think good or bad refers to?
Does a lot to do with your own morals?
It could.
The consequences?
Consequences, yes. How might these consequences affect me? Yeah. Is this a good choice? Meaning, how does this benefit me? If it's a bad choice, how does this harm me? So that can be part of ethics too. Right and wrong, we might think in terms of the morality. Good and bad, think of it in terms of benefit. In terms of maybe happiness versus unhappiness. Even. And then just or unjust. What about those words? We'll let Stephen answer that.
I feel like I turned that one.
Just or unjust? What does that mean? What does it mean to be just?
Fair.
Fair is probably our best word here. Let's just, for our purposes today, let's just say fair. Okay. Fair or unfair. You know when you've been unfairly treated, don't you? Don't you? Mm-hmm. I mean, right now, if I gave you all Fs for the, well, Alex would have to do that. Give you all Fs for the semester without seeing any of your work at the end, that would be a little unfair. You would realize that, wouldn't you? Okay, so you say, hey, that's not just. So how do we determine what's just? How do we determine what's fair and unfair? So ways of thinking about doing all those things. Why do we need ethics? Well, we're going to have things come up in our lives. And for some of you, you already know that. For some of you, you've only scratched the surface. There's going to be things that come in your lives that you have to make a decision, and there is no right answer. It's not what is it's not what's right for what's best for everybody. That sort of sense of fairness, actually, in some respects, with that. It's not. It's what gets me the most necessarily. It's not necessarily that. But there's things that come up that, and we'll talk about a couple of dilemmas here, and then maybe a little better idea about what I'm talking about. But there's no right answer. There's no right answer. For those of you who are going to go into business, you're going to go and become leaders, or you're going to be teachers, or you're going to be moms or dads, or whatever it might be, there's going to be something that comes across your way, maybe even almost every day. That's an ethical decision. You may not think of it that way, but it's an ethical decision. So the reason we teach ethics and why ethics is important, and not just like journalism, but also in business, in healthcare, in education, in government, obviously, those things is because those questions, those dilemmas come our way all the time. And if you have these ways of thinking, it will help you to make a better decision. That's all I can give you. It will help you make a better decision. And it may only be in your view. But at least it would be an educated, thought-out view. Okay? Not just something like, oh, I just think that's wrong, or I just think that's right. And you can't explain it. See? Part of philosophy is what's your argument? Can you make an argument? Can you make a rational argument about why you think this? So these ways of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust, is ethics, falls under philosophy. So, questions? Anybody? All right, moving right on. Sorry, how did I turn that off? Ignore this. I don't even know why it's in there. All right, and we'll do that for all of them. There are 5 purposes of ethics. 5 purposes of ethics. And these tend to be very pragmatic, or very, very practical. Pragmatic here is what's right, if it works, and what works is what's right. So there's 5 purposes of ethics. One's to keep society from falling apart. How would ethics keep society from falling apart? How would these ways of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust, keep our society from falling apart?
Somebody has to choose the same thing.
Okay, so we all have a general understanding the way, the order of things. Yeah? We sort of do. We may not agree about them all the time. One of my favorite examples is a stop sign. And so there is, it's a funny stop sign. The stop sign that's over here, that's coming between Melton and the post office. Okay? So there's a stop sign there. Why is that stop sign there?
Make your stop.
And why do we make people stop? Just because we're cruel and unusual?
So that way they can know both ways we choose.
That's right. So part we have this idea of safety, okay, and with that comes this idea that order brings about safety. Okay. Now, if there's no one coming, do you stop?
Yes.
Oh, why?
Because it's the law and you don't want to give it.
Oh, so we have a law. So we've made a law to represent something we think is right. In this particular, that we see it's good. You might not say it's right, but it's good. It's to our benefit that we stop there. Now, at midnight, are you going to stop there? We'll talk later. Okay, yeah. So we'll come back to the stop sign. To keep society from falling apart, order is good. Order will keep a society. So why do we want our society to remain intact? To what benefit is that to us?
Not chaos.
So it's not chaos. So we can do what?
Be peaceful.
We can be peaceful, and that we all can benefit, and maybe in varying degrees, but we can benefit from that peaceful, that ordered society. Okay, so to keep society from falling apart. The second one, big word, ameliorate. It sounds like someone's name gone bad. What is it? What is that word? You might know. Ameliorate. To stop, not quite stop. We would like for it to stop, and that would be a goal, just to make it stop. But what else? Eliminate, again, we would like for that to happen, but ameliorate is more like easing. Let's put it that way, to ease people's suffering. Ameliorate, to ease, to reduce, to hopefully a goal would be to eliminate it if possible. But here, ameliorate would be in that terms of easing. And why would we want to do that? I know that's a no-doubt question. Maybe. Why would we want to do that? Because we don't want us to suffer. Personally, we don't want to suffer, right? But why would we want to?
Depends on the person.
It does. Yeah. And so, as an ethical person, maybe, or a moral person, an ethical person in this particular case, would be concerned with someone else's suffering. And part of it comes back to us too. We don't want to suffer, so we don't want someone else to suffer either in that particular case. The second one, to promote human flourishing. What do you think that means? To thrive. Yeah, that's a good word. We want to promote human people to thrive. Why is that important? Is there something we draw out of nowhere?
So the society can grow and we can grow as people and as a...
Yeah, sure. We grow as people. Our society grows. If we all flourish, we all benefit from that flourishing. Sure. Okay. The fourth one often is recognized as to resolve conflicts of interest in just and orderly ways. In other words, that ethics helps us to sort out conflict. Okay. Our legal system is somewhat based on that, certainly. So it helps to sort out things. So what's being fair to someone? If you have a conflict with someone, well, let's put it this way. If you are the mediator, never done this, it's very dangerous. If you are helping a friend and another friend come back together for whatever reason, why would you do that? Because you care about the friends, usually. I'm not sure sadist, maybe. But yeah, you want that to happen. So how would you do that? Well, one way may be to say, let's consider what's right and wrong here. Let's consider what's good or bad, and maybe even what's fair, what's just and unjust. And looking at that, if you're trying to do that. So ethics can help us do that too. Finally, to assign praise and blame, reward the good, and punish the guilty. That's the sense of you've done something wrong. You've created a bad situation, or you've been unjust here. And so we, as a society, to maintain that order, going back to the first one, we create systems, and usually it's a legal system, but we create systems, and actually not always legal systems, but we create these systems to reward those who do good. It's like your dog, nice, good job. They're not, peeing on the floor or something. But if they pee on the floor, then you're going to smack their butt or whatever it might be. So you're trying to. We do the same thing. That's what we do with kids. My kids, like your kids. We need to be able to do that. So we do that in society too. Note here, guys, that our legal system is not our moral system, nor is it an ethical system. It is only the result of what we have come to believe to be good for our society, to be right for society, to be good for society, and to be just for society. When I talk about ethics, these are ways of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. When I talk about morality, morality is what we have decided from our ways of thinking to be right, to be wrong, to be good, to be bad. And then there's an association there with religion, oftentimes. Okay, so we have the ethics of these ways of thinking. There's no value there. There's just these ways of thinking about how do we understand the situation. You'll see that more in a minute. Our morals then are what we establish, whether that be individually or that be at a society or a small group or whatever it might be. Everybody understand? And then the legal system is how we enforce the rules in a society, based on our morality, based on our ethics. Okay? I'm giving you a lot here. So we'll do something a little more interactive in just a minute. Okay, so these are the 5 purposes of morality. Why they're there, why we need to do that. Some big words here. Let me kind of break this down a little bit to you. I do all of this in a semester, so you guys are feeding or drinking at the fire hydrant today. There are different perspectives on these, and we've already talked about some of them. We're going to look at 8 ethics. There are 8 principal ethics, and they have ranges. So one range is the subjective side, and one is the objective side. In other words, on the subjective side, what? What does the word subjective mean?
It's like unbalanced, or looking for, I guess I can explain objectivism, but
What's objectivism? Don't give me
it's seeking after something rationally, or
Okay.
trying to get a goal done.
Okay, objective would be more of a set way, something that is a methodical way of looking at something that everybody can agree to, an objective way. Because we have some ethics that are that way. It's like, that's what it is. And there's no maybe ifs, ands, or buts about it. On the subjective side, it's more like, this is the way I feel about it, or this is the way I think about it, this is the way I individually or my group might see it. So that's the subjective versus objective. So some of these ethics are more subjective, some are more objective. Don't worry about the rest of this. Relativism versus absolutism. What's relativism? Somewhat associated with subjective. Relativism is what is right and wrong, good or bad, just or unjust, is relative to the group in which you belong. Someone give me an example.
If you're a Christian, then you think that I'm trying to think of something that's
Fine,
not true. That
Let's say Christians try to keep
sinning
right.
is bad.
Okay, that's pretty general. Okay, yeah, we can do that. If we say it is relative to that Christian group. Okay, if you there are other groupings. Okay, so it's by perhaps by ethnicity. It's by a social class. It's by even historic time frame. At one point in this country, then slavery was thought to be right. In another time frame, the current time frame, then slavery is wrong. So it was relative to the time frame. So relativism means it's relative to whoever says it's right or wrong, but it's usually to a group with that. Everybody kind of get that? It's relative. It helps you think of that. Like my relatives thinks this, but my friends think this. If that helps you remember something. Absolutism means just that. It's an absolute. It is not relative. There is no maybe. It is this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts. That's it. Okay? That's absolutism. So there's a range of that within these 8 ethics. The last one, just forget these 2 big words. Okay? I mean, you can look at them if you want. But my ethics students need to know that. Primarily, though, it has to do with consequences matter and consequences don't matter. In our 8 ethics, you will see some in which the consequences is the way we determine what's right or wrong. So we weigh the consequences. There are other ethics in where the consequences do not matter. It's only how we get to this idea of right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. And those are often in conflict with each other. And you'll see an example here fairly soon.
Again, just for
Some ways. Some ways. That's probably a little limiting. Just the consequences. If I do this and so let me think of something. If I run the stop sign. No. Let's see. That's right. If I run the stop sign, then I have the potential of hitting someone or getting hit, being hurt, my car being damaged. If I run the stop sign, I have the potential of getting ticketed. If I run the stop sign, then I can get to wherever I need to go quicker, so I don't have to stop. Right? If I stop, then I don't get a ticket. I'm more likely to be safe with that. And I have a little problem with maybe it takes more time. Okay? So all those consequences go in our thought patterns, our ways of thinking about, is this a good thing to do or not? There would be some, and there are fewer, of these ethics that say the consequences don't matter. You stop because you adhere to the basic nature of the law, the respect for the law. That's why I asked you earlier, would you stop in the middle of the night? Because if you stopped in the middle of the night, more than likely, there's no one coming, there's no cop around, probably not going to be a cop around or whatever, but you do it either out of habit or you do it basically out of respect for the law. I do it because it says stop. The consequences don't have anything to do with it. Okay? So, consequential and non-consequential. There's going to be some, this is where it gets weird, I won't get all that, but they're kind of both. They're sort of both. All right, so those are the differing perspectives of our ethics. Questions? Okay. There are 8 primary ethics, so you may want to write these down. I'll give this slide to Alex if she wants to put them on something. The first one is called contractualism. And it has to do with contracts. It has to do with informal and formal contracts that we make. More about that in a minute. Ethical egoism is the second one. Egoism, where did egoism come from? Ego, and where does the word ego come from? One more time? Ego is still the basic word. Where does the word ego come from? Self? Yes, it means self. We think of it in terms of Freud, Sigmund Freud, in psychology. Okay? And the ego is the self that comes out, I like to say it sort of squirts out between our id, which is the nasty side of us, and the superego, which is my mother, who says, you can't do that. Okay? Kind of deal. So the ego sort of comes out here. So the idea of ethical egoism is what is right, good, bless you, right, good, and just for me. It's focused on me. That's what ethical egoism is. Ethical hedonism. Hedonism? What's hedonism? What's it mean to be a hedon? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Sounds like a bad thing.
Sounds like a bad thing. What's it mean? If you're a hedon, you love. What do you say?
Do what you want.
Well, it's partly there, but what is it that you do? What is it you want when you do? It's all about pleasure. Okay? So we try to maximize our pleasure. There's a connection between egoism and hedonism here, but those are two different ethics. The fourth one is virtue ethics and naturalism. I have to explain that a little bit more. Existentialism, which is very complex, but I'll give you a little rundown about that. Has to do with our existence. How do we maximize our existence as people? Kantianism is the most complex, but a really good one to consider. I'll try to do as much as I can today with that. Utilitarianism. This one we understand easily. Anybody know what that is? Anybody know what utilitarian means? Actually, we use that word incorrectly, I think. When we say something's utilitarian, we think it serves a purpose. Like a utility knife or something like that. Utilitarian is about what's greatest good for the greatest number. And in the American society, we think of that a lot. Okay. Yesterday, we did a utilitarian activity called election. The greatest good for the greatest number. So the greatest number wins with that. However, the question is that always the greatest? Is it the greatest good for those who are not in the greatest number? So we'll talk about that in a minute. And then theologism or absolutism. Sometimes this is even called divine command theory. This one has to do with religion, obviously. Okay, so those are our 8 ethics. And I'm going to give you just a little taste of all of them. Contractualism. Now, there's a lot of stuff here, I realize. Okay. Contractualism is based on Thomas Hobbes. If you've had political science yet, as you will, but Thomas Hobbes talks about the social contract. Social contract theory is what? Anybody? You didn't know this would be a final on every class you've ever taken. It all comes together. By the way, philosophy is the first subject. That's arguable. You could say religion is the first subject, but philosophy is the first subject. And everything else that you take in college, everything else that we think about in terms of subject comes from philosophy. They just start breaking themselves out. So, social contract theory, anybody? Alex, you want to explain that?
I always think of him as gunslinger.
Yeah.
Always out there to get him, shoot the other guy before anybody else can shoot him.
That could be, sure. Social contract theory, Thomas Hobbes says, is that there is a contract. And on either side of contract, there are at least 2 sides. And then we're going to stick to the 2 sides, because after that it gets a little kind of messy. But there's 2 sides. In a social contract, there's the society, or we can say government, but society or government, and me, or you. There's 2 sides. So what contract do you have with society?
Pay your taxes?
Pay your taxes. And why do you pay your taxes? And what's your name again? Because I've already forgotten all of these.
Rebecca?
Rebecca. So why do you pay your taxes?
Because Uncle Sam wants to.
What?
I don't know.
No, what did you say?
Because Uncle Sam wants to,
And why would they want us to?
so we can help fund everybody else.
Okay.
Keep everything going.
To keep everything going. And so what do you get out of that?
Supposedly, sometimes you give them back.
Well, no. No money back. What do you get out of that? It all goes, our little thing. It all goes to Uncle Sam. So what do you get out of that? Protection.
You get fancy stuff on your screen.
Yeah. If you, for instance, if you drive a car, how many of you, I guess all of you drive a car, okay? So to get that car, whether you or your parents or significant other or a dog or somebody, but what did you have to do to get that car? Well, one, you had to do what? One of the first things you have to do. You're 15 and a half, 16. When do you have to learn how to drive? Okay, and what do you have to do to learn how to drive legally? Okay, before you do that, well, you have to take a test, and you have to pass the test, and you get a little permit, right? And so it costs you to get the permit, and the permit says you're licensed to learn how to drive, at least in the state of Missouri, all this. At some point, you get a full license, and you're able to do that, right? Well, when you buy a car, what do you have to do when you buy a car? One, you have to register it, which means you get a license plate, okay? And that costs money. And what else do you do when you buy a car?
Insurance.
You have to get insurance, okay? So part of what you have to do in order to have a car and drive it is to have insurance. What's the other thing you have to do? I'm really depressing some of you, aren't I? Do what? You have to pay sales tax. This is the one that hurts. Just me. So you have to pay a lot of money in sales tax to the government. Now, where does that go?
It goes back to us.
It goes back to you. Thank you.
More federal spending.
Maybe. The idea here, in terms of society, is that whatever we have a contract with society. If you want the privilege of driving, of having a car and being mobile in that particular way, then you have part of the contract, and the government has part of the contract. Your part of the contract is that you get a license, you learn how to drive, you get insurance, all those kind of things. You pay some money to do that. The government side of that is that they pay for streets, curves, street signs, stop signs, police officers, all those kind of things as part of the infrastructure that allows you to drive. Now, if you decide to break your end of the contract, meaning DWI or whatever it is, then you can't drive. You've broken the contract. Now, the thing we forget, though, is that the government has a side of the contract, too. So then if you pay all this money and it goes someplace else, and they're not helping your roads, and they're not enforcing things or whatever it might be, then the government isn't following through with their side of the contract. And what Hobbes eventually said is that if that happens, then we as citizens can then say, no, we're getting a new government. See, and that's what happened then with the American Revolution. Is that the American patriots, colonists at the time, told King George, crazy King George, basically, screw you. You're not upholding this end of the contract. Okay? So this is a contractualism thing. What's that have to do with ethics? With ethics here, let's go down to the second one. We operate within the rules needed within a war of all against all, he says. In other words, we're all out for our own selves. You see it that way? We're all out to protect our own selves. In general, okay. Some of us aren't quite that hard, but we're all out for our own selves. It's what we need to do. So to do that, to make things work in order so that we all win, or at least we all have the opportunity to win, then there needs to be something there. It's called the social contract. So we're all under this contract. If you don't play the rules, then you don't get to play. Right? That's the sense of it being fair. Further down, it says it's in each individual's best interest to keep to the rules if one, everyone else does. You ever play a game in which it degenerated to where no one kept the rules? There's a great game called Mao? You ever play Mao? Where you make up the rules and you go along, but no one knows what the rules are. It's crazy. It's fun. It's crazy. We need to know what the rules are. I am Mr. Order kind of person. And I remember being in school and thinking, hey, that kid up there is talking all the time. And you told us not to talk. And I'm sure you love me. That's why I became a teacher. But it is, you know what I mean? It's like, wait a second, that's not fair. Let's all play by the rules. Because if someone gets ahead of the rules, if someone gets, maybe they're pulling too much money out of the pot, or maybe they don't get, arrested for speeding, but my best friend does, it's simply because he knows the policeman or whatever else. And he's like, can't do that. See, we want to be played by rules. So the contract is very, very important to us. This also can be in terms of, so there's formal contracts, there's formal contracts, Did I put that up there? Yeah. There's formal contracts. Think of a loan. Okay, so if you're going to buy that car and you don't have the money, then you enter into a loan with a bank or whatever it might be. And so you sign these formal contracts, and they will give you the money to buy the car if you promise to pay it back. If you don't pay it back, then what are they going to do? They're going to take the car, and your credit's going to be ruined forever. So there's contract. There are consequences to those things. Contractualism is a consequential ethic. Then the consequences matter. The consequences matter in being able to do that. And informal employment's one of those things too. Okay, maybe you're not signing a contract, but it's still a formal type of contract. In that, if you enter into a job with someone, you're the employer is telling you, "I will pay you this amount for this amount of time. You do this job," and you're saying, "Mr. Employer, I will take that money, but I will do what you ask me to do." If either side of you do not uphold that contract, then it's broken, and typically you're out on your keister. Typically, okay. It's a little hard to come back on an employer. Sometimes there's more power on one side than the others. You know that too. Informal, family and friends. So give me an idea of a contract with a friend.
Babysitting.
One more time.
Babysitting.
Babysitting. Let me go to this word. That was a little more in terms of employment, I guess. What's a contract with a friend?
Telling secrets.
Okay. So if you tell a secret to your friend, what are you expecting that friend to do?
Not tell secrets.
Not to tell the secret. Now, you didn't say, okay, sign here, that you're not going to tell the secret, and if something happens, then you're beheaded. But what is it that you have that expectation, right? Now, your friend, does she have an expectation of you? What do you think about this?
To not tell anybody else's secrets.
No, not necessarily. She has the expectation that you will tell her secrets. Or him. Does that make sense? I mean, so why didn't you tell me that? You ever wonder, it's like, why didn't you tell me that? Aren't we friends? So there's sort of a contract there. There's a relationship that you have. But if either side breaks that contract, then it's wrong. Okay, so we get to the ethics side of here. It's wrong. So upholding the contracts help keep order. It is to your benefit, the good side of things. And you can get to the idea of right and wrong, which is more aligned with the morality of that idea. But it's also fair. So we have these contracts in our lives, lots of them. You have a contract in this class. Your syllabus is a contract. Alex has a contract with the university. I have a contract with the university. Alex's contract with you is that she, in mine for today, is that I deliver something of worth to you, right? And if you get crap, then this one you have to say, well, this didn't work. I didn't learn anything. So there's a contract. You have certain, and at the end of the semester, you have the opportunity to do an evaluation, right, Alex? We all do that. It's a part of the contract, and it helps. It helps keep things in a certain way. So that's part of ethics. Contractualism, then, is a way of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust, in terms of our contractual relationships that we have with others. All right, ethical egoism. I need to move along. Ethical egoism is, the definition here is the best life. Now, you'll see that every once in a while in ethics, the best life. And we're looking for the best life. Philosophy is about life. How do I live life? What's the structure of thinking about living? And in ethics, this idea of best is there. How ought, you don't say that word too often. How ought I, how should, yeah, but this idea of oughtness has to do with an ethic. It's right to do this, and so I ought to do that. Anyway, the best life is one in which I succeed in getting what I want, and it must produce the greatest happiness. Now, this sounds really, really selfish, doesn't it? Well, it's really, really selfish. And there are people, like all of us, that use this. Right? Can we be honest? You have to be honest if you do ethics. Yes. There's things that you want. And so my decisions, and this is very consequential, ethical egoism is based on the consequences. If you don't get what you want, then you see it as being wrong or bad, or maybe even unjust. But if you get what you want, you see it as right. and good, maybe and just. Now, does this affect anybody else?
Yes.
Yes. While it's centered on me and what I get in my best life and how I maximize my happiness, but I am not an island, as someone said. And it is that what happens to me also happens to other people. So in my particular case, I'm a father of 4, and I have a wife, and I have friends. And what choices I make will affect principally my wife and my family. So it may just be about me. Like right now, I'm working my doctorate. Okay, I'm finishing up with this dissertation thing. And it's just driving me nuts because it's taking all my time away from something I really want to do, which is be with my family and work on the house and whatever else I want to do. But I have to take, and you guys are in education too. You know, I mean, you are, right? You're getting an education. So there's certain things that this is for you, I hope. If it's not for you, then you need to question why you're here. But that's another question. That's another speech. If it's for you, then there's some things that are going to sacrifice, right? So if you're dating someone, it's like you need to say, you know, I have to finish this paper. I got to do this. I can't go out with you. And they need to be able to really sacrifice that too. But it's still, you're saying this is what's right for me, but it affects somebody else. And choosing things to do, it needs to affect someone else too. It can still be about you. I get a good feeling by helping the little old lady whose car broke down on the side of the road. Now that may sound really selfless, but in egoism, it's like everything's selfish in egoism. It's like I get a good feeling by helping her. And she gets her car fixed and she can go on. And if I pass her by, then I feel, typically, most of us, unless there's something wrong with us, we typically feel a guilt for passing her by. So it's raining, it's cold, you know, and she's 80, 100 years old, and, you know, and she's trying to fix her car out there, and you're in a hurry because you've got to get to McDonald's, right, before the happy hour ends. So as you're passing her by, you know, it's like there's a twang of guilt there. Well, guilt's not good unless you really have problems. So you stop because you don't want the guilt. So it's in your best interest to stop, but yet you're helping her. But it's still focused on you. Does that make sense? Okay, our choices are made. Yeah, this is really quite easy to do. It's for us. Okay? It's what's in our best interest. There's a key problem here, and we all have problems, by the way. This really doesn't tell us whether it ought to be done or not. If you look at the bottom, this is sort of a famous little idea, is that if could torturing babies ever be right? Under ethical egoism, it can. It can be, you can, these, remember, are ways of thinking. So under ethical egoism, it could be right to torture babies. How?
Yes, so that benefits you.
I heard like, where? Voices from everywhere came. Who said that? Okay.
Experimental.
Experimental in lab. Experiment in lab. Sure.
How's that not wrong? Because they can't say no.
No, but I'm saying in a way of thinking, ethical egoism, a way of thinking, if we follow this definition, is that it's all about me. It's not about the baby, it's about me. And if I can say that torturing babies will give me information or give me a new way of a treatment or something like that, then and I get to be the researcher, or it helps me in solving my problem or whatever it might be, then it's right. So we have a problem with it, right? So you see the problem is that you move to an extreme, and philosophers always look at the extremes because that's where it gets messy. And in the middle is where we tend to sort of look as a society, but you have to look at the extremes to understand where does this take us. So ethical egoism can take us places we may not want to go. But yet, this is the one we use more often. Okay? All right. Next one is ethical hedonism. Much like sort of ethical egoism, but this one is a little more pointed and a little more direct. It has to do with pleasure. Okay? It's not just in my best interest, but I have to get pleasure from it. Okay? So one, we have a discussion about pleasure, but the point of living is to enjoy life, and accordingly, the best life is the most pleasurable life. Anybody know someone like this? This is the way their principal ethic. One of those things you can do sometimes. What's your principal ethic? It's kind of interesting to talk with someone about that. You need to be good friends, however. Yeah, I know some people that if they're going to make a decision, it's how does this please me? It's not in my best interest, but how does it please me? How does this bring pleasure to me? Two types. One is called the Cyrenaic. Okay, it comes from Greek words. The first one's called Cyrenaic, and it has to do with bodily pleasures. So we're talking about sex, we're talking about food, we're talking about good massage, or whatever it might be. We're talking about sensual pleasures with that. And with that, it is considered a natural good, a little more philosophical idea, but it's, in other words, we all can understand that. We all like those sensual pleasures. Can we admit that? We do. So we need to maximize pleasure, they say, and minimize pain. The problem is you can't minimize pain. Why? I mean, if you're always trying to maximize pleasure, pain will always still come. Why? Do what's
Sometimes you have to pay for pleasure.
Sometimes you do have to pay for pleasure. I love cheesecake. I love cheesecake. Okay, if you want to bribe me, Stephen,
Got it.
I love cheesecake. Man. Okay? Actually, I have a student bringing me a cheesecake. On my little cheesecake things. I love cheesecake, and I could eat a whole thing. I can eat a whole thing, but it probably would not be good for me, especially if I ate one every day. Right? You understand that? But it could be pleasurable, but it could lead to pain. I mean, it's like belly up to the buffet kind of thing, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, so good when you're going, when you're eating, it's going down and whatever, and you're walking out, it's like, The other part of this, though, in a more theoretical way, is that if you keep trying to maximize pain, you cannot maintain that high. And I use that on purpose in terms of addictions, perhaps, but it's no matter what. You can't, because if you go so far, you always have to come back down. You can't maintain the maximization of pleasure. So it always reduces, which becomes painful. There's all those people who are addicts, or whatever it might be. Addicts of drugs or alcohol or sex or pornography or cheesecake or whatever it might be, they cannot get enough. And so their pleasure, if they're going to maximize pleasure, they always have to keep going higher and higher. And then pain always results because they have to come back down. They can't maintain that high, that peak. Yes, ma'am?
Isn't it like they get their first high peak, the highest they can go, and then it gets down, and then the pain gets longer, and then it goes like this?
Yeah, sure. So you have this guy. I mean, this is ancient Greek stuff here. Aristotle is actually looking at this, and this is psychology. I mean, this is psychology of addiction that Aristotle's dealing with back in 200 or 300 BC with all of that. Epicurean's the other one. You might have heard this word. You might know what Epicurean means. Sometimes it's associated with wine. In other words, it's someone who has acquired tastes. And I acquired taste and pleasures. And so you enjoy, you enjoy one piece of cheesecake with a good cup of coffee with little raspberries. You want me to get that in? And you enjoy that. But the whole thing is not good. But you get one, and you enjoy that. Or whatever it might be. So it's like you know how to moderate things. So it's restraint. Okay? And with this, then, you can still enjoy pleasure, but there's restraint and there's no pain because of your restraint. So that's the Epicurean way of looking at it. Now we get to the extreme. I told you about the extremes. All right, sadism is the extreme here. And this is a problem with ethical hedonism. Like ethical egoism, we talked about torturing babies could be one of those things that you could say is right. Under ethical hedonism, you can say sadism is right. And that's the infliction of pain. Or wanting, infliction of pain. Masochism you could talk about too, but sadism is really what we're talking about here. So sadism, if pleasure is the only natural good, then any life filled with pleasure can be said to be a good life, or the best life. And so if people get pleasure in inflicting pain, under this ethic, it can be said to be right. And there's some people that are that way. Okay. But see, that's where this argument takes us. That's where our rationale, our reason takes us to that. It's not a slippery slope argument, if you know what I'm talking about with that. Your fallacies, you're talking about fallacies. It's really not a slippery slope argument because this is where this can take us, and there are people who take us there with the idea of sadism. All you have to look at is Nazi Germany or any of the genocides, or even a spouse who beats, abuses his or her spouse or children or something like that. Sons of sadism, animal torture. All those kind of things are associated with this idea. And in their minds, and maybe we may think it's psychological, but it's really, they can substantiate that. That's the problem with this, is you could substantiate this in that particular way. Everybody understand? So there's limits with our ethics. Okay. Questions? I'm rattling on. Okay. Virtue ethics. This one's a little harder to kind of get your mind around, at least for me. This is from Aristotle. Aristotle was a critic of hedonism, so we got a lot of ideas from him about hedonism, but he was a supporter of what he calls virtue ethics. Sometimes this is also called naturalism. So Aristotle said is what's right, virtue, in this particular case, lies between extremes. Moderation in all things. Ever heard that? Yeah, moderation in all things. His famous idea here is called the golden mean. Did I put that up there?
Yes, it's on the first last.
Oh, there I am. The golden mean. The golden mean. Mean, meaning what? Think math. Between an average. Yeah, very good. An average. So the golden average, if you will, golden being the best in the idea. So the best average. So you're looking at what's in the middle is what's best. This is really kind of a practical sort of thing. The other part of this, though, has to do with the focus here is not the action that you take, because up to this point we've only looked at if you take this, makes this choice, or you take this action, then that's what you focus on. Aristotle looks at the actor here, the person making the decision or doing the act. It's a different way of looking at it. So virtue, Aristotle says, resides within us. Are you a virtuous person? That kind of thing. And out of that virtue are good things, or good things should occur. Think for a minute about someone you would say is a virtuous person. Can you kind of think of someone in your life? You're not going to have to answer. Can you think of someone so what characteristics would you say you appreciate about that person? Anybody? Hopefully you know a virtuous person.
Honest.
Honest?
Honest.
Honest? Honesty. Sure. What else? You can count on them to tell you the truth. What else?
I know an 86-year-old lady that's a true widow.
Is a true
She's a true widow. She doesn't
Oh, really?
relations.
Has never had sex?
Well, I mean,
What did you say?
widow. She's had a husband, but for 30 years she's been a
Oh,
widow.
I'm sorry. She's never been. I mean,
She's been married.
she's been married, but only
30
once.
years. She's
I'm
been
sorry.
a
I didn't.
widow.
Yeah,
And,
true widow. I'm not thinking. I'm sorry. Yeah. So she, her idea of commitment to her husband was such that there was no one else that she wanted.
Right.
Okay, sure. That could be virtue. Yeah. But in her mind, it could be virtue. I mean, no one, I'm sure my wife Rita, but no one stacks up, to me, I'm sure. I'm sure. Get used to my humor, by the way. What else? Honesty. Commitment. Now, if it helps, think of it this way. And I don't know where you are in your relationships, but you have to think about relationships in terms of what we do here, because it's our lives. Relationships are our lives. But what is it you want in a man? What is it you want in a woman, in a wife, in a husband? What is it you want? I mean, Stephen, you're not helping yourself. What is it you want in terms of virtues? Honesty, commitment, trust, a sense of affection. You don't like the word love? How about affection? You understand what I'm talking about, though, right? Because we desire these things. I mean, we have to be honest. We desire these things, whether it's perfect or not, ideal or you could come about or not, but we still desire these things. So this idea of virtues, Aristotle says, is if you have a virtuous person, then that person is going to naturally be ethical, naturally be moral. And so it's the important thing is that you inculcate, you sow, you educate, whatever it might be, this idea of virtues within us. It's not just something we're born into, but we develop that. And if you think of some ways you can remember this, strange way, but in the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, everybody know that stupid movie? Oh.
There's three of us.
Everybody know? Okay. All of us over 40. I'm sorry. But you've seen it. Anyway, in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, anyway, Bill and Ted goes off, whatever, they're working on some paper, and they're stupid people. But they meet Socrates, okay? And actually the film is wrong. And Socrates says the key to a great life, or whatever, you have to live an excellent life, excuse me. You have to live an excellent life. Aristotle's really one who does that. He says to live an excellent life, you must live a virtuous life. And with that is the idea of thinking. You must think well. Now, you could talk about that in a lot of ways, but it ties back to our ethics, ways of thinking about what's right and wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. Of thinking well makes you a virtuous person. Education is shown to create more ethical people. There's not a sense of religion, not a sense of anything in there. It's about thinking. And ethics is that. So you start thinking through these things. How do I think through this? Because there's some people do not think. They react with their gut. They react with some other part of their body. They react, and they just react. Right? Yes? Okay. It's a real life, Why not talk about it? And so, there's some guys, particularly, that think with a particular part of their body. And there's some women, ladies, I'm sorry, who think only about what that guy can bring them with that particular part of the body. And it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with value. It has to do with how I feel about myself. But the guy knows it, and the girl doesn't. Okay? All right, never mind. More information another time. That's true. It's true. There's some women who do that. They don't think. There's some guys, they don't think. All they want's, whatever. So there's ways of thinking. Thinking well. Question of character. Good qualities that we should aspire to. The other part of this I didn't put there is that if you're a virtuous person, he says, has habitually and consistently exhibits those virtues. That's why you thought maybe of someone. You thought of your widow lady. Someone being honest. You think of someone and you call them virtuous because you've seen that in them, or that virtue exhibited in them on a consistent basis. We might call them wise. We might call them stable kind of people. And we value them. We should value them. And so Aristotle say that's where the virtues come from. This idea of the middle is example here is courage is between foolhardiness and cowardice. So what's right is in the middle. If you're thinking about on the field of battle or something like that, then what is courage? Well, courage is not just running out there with your pasta fork or something and trying to kill someone. It is thinking, all right, being smart about this. But it's not hiding in a hole either. So courage lies somewhere in the middle. That's a virtue. Courage is a virtue. All right, moving on. Existentialism. There's no way I could tell you all this. Okay. So here we go. Just reading a little bit. Notice my underlines here. I was trying to make this easier for you. What is true is that a good life, a good human life, this is what we're after by living an ethical life. A good human life is distinguished not by what is chosen. So this doesn't have to do with consequences. Rather, it's by the manner in which it is chosen. A wholly authentic, key word for the existentialist, one I really like to, or truly human life is possible only for those who recognize the inescapability of freedom and its responsibility. Okay, so what does that mean? The existentialist essentially says that in terms of their ethics, that When you choose, it needs to be your choice. It's an authentic choice. It's not a choice that's been coerced or influenced by anybody else. Now, for many of you, you are here in college, well, probably for a variety of reasons. But for some of you, it probably wasn't your idea. I'm just guessing. You don't have to confess. It was your parents' idea. Or it's society's idea. Or it's, I don't know, your husband's idea or your wife's idea. Okay. I didn't do anything. But it's not your idea. So what the existentialist says, that it's your life, first of all, your existence. This is where this word comes from. It's your existence. And if it's going to be your life, then you must choose. If it's not your choice, then you're living someone else's life. So on the ethical side of things, these choices that we make, it has to be your choice. And to do that, that means this needs to be authentic, an authentic choice. Now this is really, really difficult because we have so many influences on us, so many influences. And sometimes we can feel very, very trapped by these things. Like I had no choice to be here, and I don't want to be here, and you're not having a good time. Okay? I've seen students that way. It's like to me, you have to leave for a while until you realize you want to come back. And when you want to come back, it's a whole different thing. Passion is a mighty, powerful thing. It's a part of this whole idea of existentialism. Whenever you choose, you become passionate about whatever it is that you choose. And whether anybody else agrees with that or not, it doesn't matter. There's a religious aspect here. If you want to know more about that, think of a guy named Kierkegaard. And what Kierkegaard said is it doesn't matter if anyone understands your religion or not. It's just so that you choose and you think that's the way. There's a leap of faith, and the rest of the world, be damned. Because you choose. And it's passion. Passion comes from that choice. It's the same way of living life in this particular way of making choices. When you choose, and ethics is about choosing, then you choose authentically. Now notice, though, when you choose authentically, the consequences still may come. So to live a good life, to live a life in good faith, that means choosing authentically and then accepting responsibility for that choice. So there's a kicker on the other end. So if you're going to choose to do this, and this is your choice, this is your choice, then you must freely accept the responsibility of that choice. So this means that if you truly want to kill someone, and it is your choice, you have to freely accept the consequences of that choice. Now that may not sound like too moral of a thing or ethical of a thing, but the idea here is that you don't want to accept that responsibility. I mean, you don't want that consequence, really, when it comes down to it. But if you're going to do it, under existentialism, the way I read it at least, you could say that's a choice, and that's a good choice. Now that's an extreme. That's an extreme in there. The other, though, is an interesting way of looking at things. I choose this because I want it. No one, nobody else wants it. And I choose it because I want it. And it takes courage. There's something called existential courage. And it takes courage to do that. Because you take great risk. So living a life in good faith is that. Bad faith, then, is you choosing inauthentically. It's not your choice. You're living a life by default. Someone else is influencing you. And or you fail to accept the responsibility of the choice. So living a good life, an ethical life, is this. What comes up to it. Okay. Kantianism. Sorry. Kantianism. The most complex of them. Named after a fellow named Immanuel Kant, who's a philosopher, German philosopher. And here's what I will focus on here, guys. One, he talks about it's important that when we choose something, we do it out of the sense of good. We do it with good will, a good will. And what he means by that is we do it out of a sense of duty. And Kantianism is non-consequential, and the most, well, other than theologism maybe, the most non-consequential. You do it out of a sense of duty. Right now, in our ethics class, we're in the midst of Kantianism, so we're watching Saving Private Ryan. And if you've ever seen that film, Saving Private Ryan, you see lots of men here doing something out of a sense of duty. The consequences did not matter. They do it out of respect, what he says, for the basic moral law. Again, too much complexity within all of that. So we have a sense of duty. Consequences are not important. There are two parts of this, and you have to ask yourself these two questions. The first one is, can whatever I'm deciding to do, can it be universalized? In other words, if it was me on the other side, would I want it? So it's really kind of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. Heard of that? I hope. Okay. Yeah. So can you universalize it? If you want to, and I want to do this because Stephen knows me, but if I come to class and I have a gun and I point it at Stephen's head and I say, Stephen, I'm going to kill you. Then if I'm sorting through my moral, ethical way of doing things, then I would have to say, would I want to be Stephen? Would I want someone there with a gun to my head saying, I'm going to kill you? Well, obviously not. Okay, so you have to put yourself in someone else's place. That's an extreme. Put yourself, if lying. Under Kant, this helps to remember it, but you can't tell a lie. It is very, very strict. You can't tell a lie. Because lying, why? You don't want to be lied to. If you lie, then you're saying, lie to me. By the way, if anyone ever lies to you or they gossips to you, you need to understand that they're going to do the same thing about whatever you tell them. It is a psychological sort of thing. If someone gossips to you about someone else, or they lie to you, or lie to someone else, whatever it might be, then they're going to lie to you and they're going to gossip about you. So just don't say anything. It's worth a second. So in this particular case, yeah, it is. It's called to universalize it. So that's the first question. The second one must be there too, with him, if it's going to be a right decision, good decision, just decision. And that is, are you treating people as an end, or are you treating them as a means to an end? We all know when we've been used, right? You've been fooled, you've been suckered, you've been whatever, but we've been used in some case. We know that, and we know what it's like to be that. What Kant says is that if you're using someone to a particular as a means, in other words, something that you're wanting to get, and you're going to use them, then that's wrong. You need to treat them as an end in and of themselves. My example here is like when you go to Walmart. Anybody work at Walmart? Work at good. If you go to Walmart and you go to one of the cashiers, one of the live living ones, there, another pet peeve of mine. But if you go to a live living person there, and if you're just standing there and you're treating this person like an extension of the machine, only to get to pay for your crap and get out of there, then you're not treating that person right. You're being unethical. Because you're treating that person as a means to your end. But if you stand there and say, so how are you doing, Stephen? How are you doing, Morgan? What's your day like? When's it get over? What are my beats? Just chit-chat. But you're treating them like a human being, not like an extension of this thing. That's what Kant's trying to get to. One, can you universalize this thing? And the other, are you treating people like a human being? And this is the most rigorous, strictest of any of the ethics. And if you can't answer those two questions, what you're doing is wrong. And it's a fascinating idea, especially if you try to implement it. It's impossible. You'll fail, by the way. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It's an interesting idea. So what do you do when you have conflicting and equal? I don't have time to do that. Never mind. Ignore the last question. There can be conflicts in our sense of duties, and what do we do with that is a source of discussion, or a principle. All right, utilitarianism, we're about done. Utilitarianism is the greatest good for the greatest number. In other words, if we're looking at this entire group of you, there's probably, 18 of you, something like that. Then if I only had enough cheesecake to feed 15 of you, then the greatest good for the greatest number would be to only feed the 15 of you. Now, the 3 of you who didn't get fed are going to feel what? In a minority. But but I'm trying to maximize our group happiness. So in terms of numbers, 15 versus 3 is not really too bad. So I'm going to feed the 15. The other 3, they're just, sorry, you're left out. So they're in a minority. We think like this a lot in terms of our American society in our utilitarian way. The greatest good is the greatest number. You can think about it as in the what's commonly called Obamacare. That Obamacare, all right, that whole idea is an ethical concern, by the way. It's an ethical thing. It's a question. And so, is it right, excuse me, to force everybody to pay for a healthcare system not everybody's going to use? Is it right to do that? Well, I don't know. You have to answer that. But you can use these 8 ethics actually to do that. Okay? Utilitarianism would say yes, the greatest good, so the greatest number. And so there's some people get the shaft. Some people they're going to pay, not use, that kind of thing. Understand? Problem? What's the problem? Obviously with this ethic, not everybody's in the majority, and we all find ourselves in a minority somewhere along the way, whether because of skin color, because of ethnicity, because of gender, because of income, because of disability, because of education or lack thereof, or too much. That could be true too. All those kind of things. We could find ourselves in the minority any time. But what is the society, or what is it that whatever you're making a decision? You have to respect the minority. You have to understand the minority with that. Affirmative action. If you know anything about affirmative action, attempts to correct the utilitarian point of view. It's one of the few laws that's ever come about in the United States that it's attempted to do that. It's kind of an interesting story with that. Now we have this discussion about whether that's still what we need to do or not. So an act is determined by its contribution to desirable end. Does the end justify the means in utilitarianism? Yes. So this is in direct confrontation or conflict with Kantianism. And what's interesting about this, and if you want to go home and watch Saving Private Ryan, is that in the movie Saving Private Ryan, you have both ethics at work. And it is our view toward war. It's our view toward war. In war, the greatest good for the greatest number is that a few will die. However, we're not quite that cold. We are concerned with every individual soldier in this country. And we are schizophrenic. And this is why we have problems with ideas of war. And we should have. We should have. There are times that maybe you have to be utilitarian. The greatest good for the greatest number. World War II, you can make the argument that that was a good war because we were fighting evil. We were fighting Hitler. And so several good people had to die for the majority of the rest of humanity in some ways. Depends on how you view World War II. But on the other hand, every individual soldier, at least in the American Army, was a concern. So if you look at Saving Private Ryan, if you watch that, and I have the real habit of destroying people's view of film sometimes because I always come from the ethical point of view. But if you look at that, you have two ethics in conflict. You have utilitarianism, so that's all these guys going off to war. But you also have Kantianism, where the focus is on one man, and that's Ryan, Private Ryan, that they're going to go save. So it's a great film for those reasons. It is a democratic ideal with that. Okay. I think we understand that one pretty well. Oh, sorry. Finally, is theologism and absolutism. And with this, it has to do with religion, obviously. But there are some people, this is a way of thinking about what's right or wrong. It is what is God will. The problem with that is, whose God are you talking about? How do you know what he wills? He, she, it wills. What's my third problem? Is that... I forgot my third problem. Anyway, so what God are you talking about, and how do you know? Okay, how do you know what that is? However, we cannot ignore the fact that our moral systems in the Western world, and somewhat in the Eastern world, but in the Western world, are founded on theologism. So the Ten Commandments, whether it's from the Judaic point of view, Judaism point of view, from Christianity point of view, or even from the Islamic point of view, because they have Ten Commandments as well. And they are the Abrahamic religions. They're all stemmed from Abraham. Our legal systems in the Western world are based on this. So we cannot ignore this. As much as we may say, either there's no God, or what God, what you tell me your God says, I don't agree with what my God says, blah, 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 what it might be. You cannot ignore this. But this is the way I think.
The general way of everybody thinking about it.
Okay, more or less. We can look at that. Ethics, my definition, use of ethics, are ways of thinking. Okay, so that's why it's in philosophy. That's why we talk about it in academics, in school. Ways of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. Those are three different kinds of areas. So what is right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. When you think about right or wrong, we're thinking about essentially sort of morality in that particular way, but something that would be considered to be that's the wrong thing to do. Good or bad has to do with benefit. Okay, so that was a good thing to do. That benefited me somewhat. Just and unjust has to do with justice, and that really comes to the idea of fairness when it comes down to it. So ethics, these ways of thinking. So there are 8 ways of thinking, and Alex already has them on the board. These 8 general ways of thinking. They come from a variety of areas in our Western civilization, a Western way of looking at things. Some are deep in philosophy, some are not quite so much. So the Integrity Lecture breezes through these. You have to apologize. I have to apologize for breezing through them because it takes a whole semester for us to get through all 8 of those whenever I'm teaching ethics. So you have a little taste of what it is. Today, what I want to do is to hit you with a dilemma. A dilemma is something you look at in ethics. Oh, let me go back. Morality is, we sort of learn our morality, but for the most part, morality is what we determine to be what I believe to be right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. What I believe to be the case, and for whatever reason. It's not a ways of thinking. It's not a way of thinking. Ways of thinking opens you up to different ways of thinking. Also, these different 8 ways. But you say, that's my morality. These are my morals. This is the way you see it. Does that make sense? So ways of thinking is just, let's think about this in all these 8 different ways. But morality is what we arrive at through the ways of thinking, through our ethics, to this is the way, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, this is what's good, bad, just. Okay. So I want to hit you with a dilemma here. A dilemma in ethics is something that does not have a right answer. For some of you, that's bothersome. Okay, of course there's a right answer. Well, for those of us who teach ethics and philosophy, there's no right answer. Okay, and I'm okay with that. There are better answers than others. Okay, so that's the best way you can look at it. There are better ways of looking at that. And you will not, you will not agree. Okay? That's just the way it is. So part of it is how do we think about through these things? Think through them carefully and think through them in a useful way. Okay, of arriving at the better answer is what we're trying to do. So I have something what I use in ethics. I've used this when I've taught journalism. It's from my journalism professor at MU put this together, and should let me have one of the tapes there by that. This may not seem like anything to you, but when it happened in 1984. The year I graduated from college, my bachelor's degree. This work? Yeah. Anyway, we all looked like that, by the way. I did have hair, very much like that. But this was new stuff. This had never been shown. What you're going to see, it had never been shown on a news show. Now there had been a couple other times when this had been the case, but it was during a live filming. But this was where someone had made a decision to use a piece of tape, okay, to use a video, and then broadcast it on the nightly news. So this was at the 10 o'clock news. This is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so we're going to watch part of this, and then I'm going to ask you a question. All right, so let's see if I can get you to do this. Get this to work.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm John Mahaffey.
And I'm Jay Young. Our lead story tonight, a Baton Rouge man arrested for the recent kidnapping of a 10-year-old boy has just been gunned down in the Baton Rouge airport minutes ago as detectives brought him back from California. Eyewitness News cameras were there rolling with reporter Ed Buggs as the shot rang out. Ed, a dramatic, a tragic, and of course a bloody event.
And I think, Jay, that what rests most in my mind now, as I still try to calm down, as well as news photographer Abram McGull, is the fact that it was so unexpected. We were at the airport for the arrival this evening of a 25-year-old karate instructor. He was arriving back in Baton Rouge. Local authorities were bringing him back. He has been indicted by a local parish grand jury on charges of aggravated kidnapping. What you are about to see is some very graphic film. He was walking down the hall. This is the suspect you see on your left, and suddenly a man broke from the telephone, and as you see, they hung the phone up after, of course, having fired one shot through the head of the suspect at this time. He was on a transfer flight, a continental flight, arriving at Baton Rouge's Metropolitan Airport this evening at 9:17. The flight arrived on time, and they had just turned the corner. The gunman, who was standing there by the telephones you see, was in such a position that you did not have to go through security guards to carry a weapon. In effect, if you would ask the question, how was someone allowed to get that far into the airport with a weapon without being detected, he had not yet gone through the turnstiles which, of course, are used with and armed with magnetic detectors.
There's a little more after that, but I'm not going to show that to you. All right, so you had this guy shot, point blank, in an airport, and the news cameras were rolling. Okay, and someone made a decision. So that someone is called the gatekeeper. Okay, in journalism, it's called the gatekeeper. The one who makes a decision about what either goes in a newspaper, if you're talking about a newspaper, or it goes to be broadcast, if you're talking about television, radio, or whatever. So we had a gatekeeper. And in television, it's called the news director. Okay? So the news director makes a decision. Do we show this or not? And there are certain things that he knows. There are certain things that he doesn't know. It happens to be he. This time, maybe, sorry. And there are certain things that he knows but he cannot tell because of legal constraints. Not moral constraints or ethical constraints, but legal constraints. So he has to make a decision. He has a dilemma. Okay? He has a dilemma. So what's the dilemma? Air it or not? Okay, first of all, do we air this or not? So why air it?
Because it's news and people have the right to know that this guy who
kidnapped a child.
Did kidnap a child was gunned down in an airport by an unknown assailant at that time.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's known.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So this has happened. Okay. Crime is big news. All right. Crime is news. So this is big news. This is a small market, small media market. Think Springfield. Okay, it's that kind of a city and that kind of a media market there. So why not show it? Somebody else?
The violence when you figure kids are going to be watching the news with their parents, and violence is something that possibly wouldn't be viewable.
Sure. Violent act. Very violent act. This is not movie. This is not make-believe. This is a violent act that we see in there. Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, granted, the guy did shoot the other guy, but wouldn't that sit in conflict with the guy having a fair trial?
We have a little problem here, no. We have a potential problem. Very good. Right, so there are other parts to this dilemma, but the key dilemma here is like, do I show it or do I not? Because if I show it, there are good things if I show it, and there are bad things, consequences, if I show it. If I don't show it, there are good things that happen, and there are bad things that happen if I don't show it. Okay? So how do we work through that? So this is what we're going to do. This is something called Potter's box. Let me get over there. I think I'm in the right spot. Oh, technology works for us. This is called Potter's box. And if it helps you to remember this is actually from a professor at Harvard. It's been a few years ago. But his name was Harold Potter. Yes, they called him Harry. So if it helps you remember that, it's in Harry Potter's box. He may not appreciate that, but anyway. So this is what we're going to do. This is a way of working through a dilemma, using other things, but at some point using these ethics. So I think what Alex wants is that at some point you will listen to the integrity, if you haven't done it already, and you will understand each of these different ethical positions, these different ways of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust. Today, though, I want to work through the box with you and why you would want to do this. This is, when I teach this, I tell my ethics students, Dinner's been one of those, is that if you get anything out of this course, learn how to do this. Because this is so very, very practical in our lives. And the reason he creates this thing is really so you can do it on a napkin if you needed to. Sometimes you have time to work through a dilemma, and sometimes you don't. And some of you probably have realized that more than even I have about what do I do in this particular situation. So this is the way of thinking through effective thinking. So we're going to look at facts, values, principles, and the loyalties that are involved in this dilemma. I guess I have to go over here, right? You can do that? We have sound. I have no idea why we have sound. Secret slide. Somewhere along the line, I used it with sound. That may not even work. Okay, so here's the deal. I have to show you. I don't have my little box. If you would, get out a piece of scrap paper, all right, or the back of your slides there or something. You'll need a full sheet.
You can erase whatever you need to erase up there.
Well,
They have all the 8 ethical principles on their lectures.
Oh, okay. So
feel free to get rid of it. I didn't want to stymie you. Want to have it available in case you need it.
Now I'm forced to remember all this. Okay. All right, on your sheet, then a paper. Lengthwise, portrait, what do you say? Okay, just make an X there. Not an X, sorry, just a cross. We have 4 quadrants. In your top left, then write the word facts, F-A-C-T-S. In the bottom left, values. Bottom right is the word principles, but also put here, in just the parentheses, put ethics. And in the top right, then put loyalties. Now the reason we go in this particular way is that, one, this is the way Dr. Potter wanted us to do it. Because if you work through it in this particular way, and you can keep kind of doing it in a circle, you keep honing and understanding the situation more and more as you go along. It is not designed to give you the answer. It is designed to make you think about all the different parts of the dilemma so you can get to the better answer. And you feel more comfortable, if you can. Sometimes you can't. But you feel more comfortable and you're better informed in making that decision. So what we're going to do, we go through the facts first, okay? And so if you would look at your dilemma, and the particular dilemma that we looked at, we're going to look at the facts. What are they? And they help us understand the context. And it's important that you be as detailed as possible. Now, when you're looking at the facts, it's not what you read into it. Some of you are already reading into it. All right? It's not what you're reading into it. It is what is it that I know for sure.
Guy got shot.
So here we have a guy got shot. Very good. Where did he get shot? Airport. Why is that important? Well, that's where it happened.
Well, it's a public
okay,
place
so if I'm
also.
a journalist saying it's important, you know where it is. But if it's why it's important to our dilemma.
Because it's supposed to have security.
Yeah. Even in 1984, it has security. Back in 9/11, it's much, much different. But it is. It's a public place. This is a public place, and somehow this guy got in with a gun. And it was before the turnstiles. I mean, in 84, I mean, it's just used to the turnstiles. Maybe there was a metal detector there. I don't know. But it's a public place. So, one, guy got shot, public place. What else do we know? Just from what's here, what do we know?
He was in custody with the police.
Okay, the guy who just got shot, okay, was in custody. He was being transported from California back to Louisiana, extradited is the word. And so he was in custody being brought back. Now, He had handcuffs on. But security, I mean, it was like there was maybe a couple of deputies or something there walking with him. But they weren't necessarily concerned in being harmed. You might not either, I suppose. But we do know that. Okay, so he's being brought back from California to Louisiana on charges that he had kidnapped. In the United States, we are still innocent before proven guilty. So he is innocent at this point in time. He's been charged, but he is innocent. So that goes back to then your point earlier, is that, whoa, wait a second. You know, he was supposed to be, he was charged with this. That's part of it. But the other part is the guy who just shot him, so we know someone just shot him. He now he's going to be up on charges too. And if you're going to show this thing, then it affects the justice in both cases. Now, I know the guy's dead. Well, his life is being played out on the floor. Okay. And at the broadcast, they have not been, they know he's dead. Okay. But the coroner has not called him. The coroner must declare him dead before the newscast will say he's dead. He's dead. Okay, he's dead by the time this was broadcast. But they can't say that. Because there's only like 45 minutes here between the shooting and the time. So that's another part of the fact here that you need to consider, is that this is done just 45 minutes early.
And they only say he was shot in the head.
Oh, they say he's shot in the head. Sure. You can't say he's murdered, because that indicates willful, and that seems kind of silly, but you cannot say the word murder in news unless they've been convicted of murder. Okay, so if you're writing for a newspaper or doing television, then you can't say murder. You know, that this guy murdered him or is charged. He might be charged with first-degree murder, but you can't say he allegedly murdered, because that shows inclination, intent, that you can't tell. As a newspaper reporter, you can't do that. So we know the facts. Okay. What else? One guy shot him. Public place. Guy appears to be dead. He was up on charges. What else?
He was helpless.
Do what?
He got shot when he was helpless because he couldn't move.
I missed the first part. What did you say?
I said the guy who got shot, he was pretty much in a helpless state when he got shot. Because I mean, the
I
guy
understand.
escorting him was.
Okay, I was thinking something else. Yeah, he was sitting up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we may have a situation here about security, or how the deputies here should take care of what?
Some no security.
Yeah. Yeah. Some other things here is you're the only television station who has this film. You're the only one. Now, what difference does that make? Now, you didn't say it. You don't need to say it. But why does that make a difference? Yes, sir.
Because if you put it on the air, then people will turn and watch it.
That's right. So we have, if I'm the only TV station that has this, I have exclusive footage. So if I make a decision, this is the only way it's going to get out, or this is the only way it gets out. In other words, this is great for a journalist who's hungry to give a good news story, but on the other hand, I don't have to get it out. If I decide this is too gruesome for my audience, I don't have to get it out. If there's competition, and in the media there's competition. All media is privately owned. And so it's neat. You have to have competition for things to happen. And part of that is ratings. So if I get this out, then people start watching it. And my ratings go up. If my ratings go up, then the station gets more money. Then I get a higher salary, blah, blah, blah.
Exclusiveness of the actual data that station has puts them at the top and is going to pull viewers just because of the fact that they're where things are happening.
That's right.
Where everybody else is not.
And that word gets out. Where did you see that? Yeah. Now, if you put it on, and there's a big hullabaloo over this, and there was in some respects, actually there was more hype than there was hullabaloo. But if there's no problem, then people start protesting, and you get calls to the station, and then maybe your position is on the line. If you do that, you're the same.
I was going to say a lot of it's probably to please their sponsors. I mean, privately owned.
Yeah, it is.
Sponsors
Sponsors want ratings. They want their commercial seen. Exactly. So that's a dilemma. It's like if I do this, then we get more money. But if I do this, then potentially even harms the station in terms of its reputation, journalism, or even if it's just the wrong thing to do. Audience, our time frame. This is a 10 o'clock sort of thing. All right, a 10 o'clock sort of thing. But what I have my students do, okay, let's take it from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So what if this happens at 5:15, and then we have the tape, and we're going to put it on at 6 o'clock? Does that make any difference?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have different audience. Yeah, much different audience. Okay, so we know the facts. All right, let's kind of move through this. So we know the facts. We have to be detailed about that. Then we go to values. Now the values here is that I want you to consider that you are the television, you're the news director. Okay, so you've got these facts. There's some things that we don't have time to talk about today that you know again that you can't say, which makes a little bit difference about maybe the fairness of the trial that's coming up, maybe about some other things. But the values that you hold. So this is what you hold in this position. One of these days, when you have a position, some of you already have positions, okay, and what you do. And there are certain values you have to hold in that position. As an instructor, then there are certain things I hold as a value. So as a news director, what might be some of the values that this guy held? Values about his job, about some other things. What's important to a journalist?
The value of the exclusivity.
Okay,
of the,
sure. Of telling, there is a reason they call it news, because it's new. They don't call it olds. All right, so it's new. So you want the latest out there. Okay, good. What else? What else would you value as a journalist? What do you
validity of the content?
The validity of it, sure. Is this an honest report? I mean, are you being honest with what you show? Now you have to say, wait a second, what's the term? What do you mean by honesty? Well, you have to ask that question.
And when they show that video, you don't know all the facts unless you're from that area and already know the story behind it.
Yeah. So you're
not getting the whole...
Right. So you have to be careful because of the time frame here. You don't have time to flesh out all the things. You don't have time to get all the permissions. There are certain permissions you have to get from law enforcement people. You don't have the time to do all that. Yet, like Ginger said, there's part of your audience already knows some of the story because the story that ran the week before was about the kidnapping. So the guy who got shot, we know his name. And they even say his name here, but what's the problem with saying the name? They can say the name. They can say the name because the guy was being brought back, so they can do that. But what's the problem? Is that his family does not know that he's been shot and killed, or been shot. They don't know
Except
that.
when they watch the news.
So if we show this, and suddenly, oh my gosh, that's the fellow, or whatever. So we have an ethical problem. So the values. What values do you hold? You hold honesty. You hold. You value being a journalist. You value the public's right to know, whatever that right is. By the way, right here is an interesting word. We think we have rights to know, and you really don't have a whole lot of rights to know. When you do that. Yes, sir.
I think one good thing about the video is also where the saying is one picture is worth 1,000 words. How are you going to put that into word when you can show that?
That's right. You value telling the story as well as you can, and in a video or a photo can tell a lot. Yeah, it's a very powerful sort of thing. So you can value that. But you also value your audience. You value their respect. You value how you treat them. You value being a competitor in a market. All those kind of things are part of that. But you also notice if you start listing all these values, and you have to kind of be very thorough with it. You have to look within to look at all that. And you also start to note that, wait a second, these values are in conflict with each other. You can value your audience, but at the same time, you value being a journalist. And sometimes, I've done this before when I was a journalist, is you tell a story that you would not tell your audience in other situations. But you tell them because it's the story, it's the needs of the story and the integrity of the story. You want it to be a certain way. And so you tell it that way for their information. They may not like it. They may be offended, and they may be, they may be peeved at you to no end, and they will call you the next morning, believe me, and tell you about it. But you still do it, because that kind of information can be very important. So these values can be in conflict. Okay, so another part of what the dilemma is. But you have to go through the values. Next, you go to the principles. Now, for your purposes, look only at the 8 ethics. Okay, just at 8 ethics. So we've gone from facts, right, so you can there. Note this is just a small quadrant. Don't let that fool you, all right? It is that, think of this maybe as an entire page or sheet of paper, and you have front and back that you're putting facts on. That might be the best way. Try to, just think of it as thoroughly as possible. Values, and then we move to the principles. In this particular case, we're looking at all 8 of those ethics. Okay, so you start with ethical egoism, ethical hedonism. You go all the way through that. So as you learn those ethics, how would you use this way of thinking, this ethical egoism? We'll start with contractualism maybe first on your list. We start with contractualism. Start with that. No, we start with ethical egoism. Might be easier to think about. We start with ethical egoism. Ethical egoism says that I'm going to maximize my best self-interests for my happiness. Now, based on ego, that whole idea of ego, it's what's in my best self-interest. Now, that can sound really selfish, but it doesn't always have to be selfish. Okay? Because I can do things for people like my kids or my students that's still in my best self-interest. But it includes them too. That makes sense? I do it for me, but it includes them too. So under ethical egoism here, what's in the news director's best self-interest?
Put that story on.
It could be putting the store on. Making more money. Exclusive. Fame.
Yep.
I don't know about fortune, but in journalism there's not much fortune.
This is for the writer or the guy.
Reputation. Awards. But there also could be, wait a second, this puts my job at risk. I am now also have harmed my audience, and they're supposed to be paying attention to us, to this, and now they're going to be mad, blah, blah, blah. So you can go the other way, too. So with ethical egoism, you have to go all the way through that. So these ways of thinking about what's right or wrong, good or bad, just or unjust, you go through each of those ethics, each of them, and you apply it. And I realize that's going to be a little difficult for you all, simply because we've done this kind of quickly for you, but just get the idea. You go through those 8 ethics with them. Then you go to loyalties. The next one, you go to loyalties, and with that, that's what you're looking at. To whom are you loyal? To what? To whom are you loyal? What would be the loyalties of a news director? To his bosses? To his what?
Station manager.
To the, station manager, that's fine. Yeah. To whoever his upper ups, sure. To us is who?
People.
People, his audience, very much. Who else? Or what else?
And we have a victim.
We have some loyalties to some victims here. Yeah. Because you have when you put this on here, you have changed the environment in which a decision is going to be made about the guilt or innocence, or the level of guilt or innocence, is the level of guilt in this particular case, I suppose, of the guy who shot. So we do affect the situation. In Louisiana, in this particular case, it really affected the situation. Tremendous. You're also loyal to your profession, and then you also have loyalties to personal things. Whenever I was a journalist, I was loyal to my family as well. Because it wasn't just me. My name was on the byline or the photo or whatever it was, but they knew that my wife was married to me, and things would be said to her, or she would end up having to explain, which she didn't need to, but explain why did Dennis do that? Because you're put on the spot. So you have a loyalty to your family as well, and then you have a loyalty to yourself. You always have a loyalty to yourself. Can you make this decision? Would this be a decision you would make if other things were different? Okay? Or you held a different position? Those things you have to look. And so again, you're going to have loyalties that are going to be in conflict with each other. And the question here, when you look at these loyalties, they're in conflict. And that's, again, why it's a dilemma. Can you maintain them all? No. if you can maintain all those loyalties and all those values, then it's not a dilemma. Okay? It's like, it's like a good thing and a bad thing. Well, which one are you going to choose? Well, no doubt. You're going to take the good thing unless you're insane. Or you're just masochistic. But you'll go for the good. But if you have good and good, that's a dilemma. The problem is when you have bad and bad. Really, the problem is when you have bad, 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 and bad and bad. So what do you do? Okay? So what does you do? So with the potter's box, we have our things here, our little quadrant. And in our particular case here, I'm showing you just a little bit of things. So we have one man's dead, shot at the airport. Yep, that's important. Public safety. This is important. And journalism provides information about public safety. Videotaped, yeah, it's only one. The station's the only one who has it. Public has previous information about things. Values, we talked about those. Principles, I put 4 of them up there, but you would do all 8. And then you have these loyalties. So you have loyalty to the public, to humanity, to the truth, to the journalism profession, and to yourself. The idea here is that this is not, spit out the answer. You still have to make the decision. But if you've gone through this and you understand the ethics, there, then you will make an informed decision. And you will have considered the consequences, you've considered the environment, you've considered all those different things that you have to make this decision. Does it make it any easier? Yeah, it does. Does it make it quicker? No. Okay, that's the bad thing. Is that sometimes you don't have time to do that. But if you are, so I guess the idea here of teaching ethics and using Potter's Box and doing it over and over and over and over again is that you become somewhat quickly you become accustomed to make a quick answer based on maybe previous decisions you made. You have to be careful with that, but also how these things work, how they work together, and how you can quickly ascertain what's the right thing. So this is Potter's Box. Okay? Questions? It's not that difficult. The box is not that difficult. So what would you have done quickly? You were the news director here. What would you have done?
Show the tape.
What did you say, Trevor?
I'd show the tape.
Show the tape. By the way, you have options here too. Sometimes on television it looks like that's it. There's 12 minutes of tape that was available. I've seen all of it. The guy, he does wrestle. He talk about Yeager the Rattle or whatever it is, but he wrestles with his life. He's not completely dead there on the airport floor, and you see blood and all this kind of thing. So there's 12 minutes of tape. But they don't show you 12 minutes of tape, do they? But sometimes it looks like, well, that's this one linear kind of view of tape. It's spliced and edited. It's not reality. You all know that, but we don't always think that. Okay? So there's the option here is I don't have to show all of it. I just show part of it, so my audience gets the idea. So there are options within it. What else would anybody not show it? Anybody not show it? Why not?
That's a
Victim's family? Yeah. That's probably the biggest deal. The other part is that you have the shooter's family.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
You also have the shooter's family. And I guess I need to tell you now, but the shooter was the father of the boy who was kidnapped.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. And so he was charged with capital murder, which then it would be found guilty, then it would be the death penalty. But in the end, he was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. And I'm sorry if you're from Louisiana. That's sort of Louisiana justice, okay? A little bit.
But the rest of this.
And was it affected by the news media? Everyone had seen this in Louisiana, and how do you get a free trial? How do you get a fair trial? How do you get a fair trial? The other part of this that became a reason that ethicists have looked at this, journalism ethicists, is that after this time, then this tape, and remember this is 1984, this is not, you put it on YouTube immediately, or send it around with your phone, but there was a request around the world for this tape. And they sent it out after a little while. It was for satellite feeds and stuff like that. So for a period of time, they did send it when there was a request, and then it started becoming, everyone wanted it, and they stopped because it became, wait a second, this is top. I mean, people are getting hyped over a murder. And so they stopped. So it's not just what you do in your own little locale. Sometimes you have to think globally as well. I mean, these things, viral videos these days, you go crazy with lots of this stuff.
The way you present it is not all the facts and the information is available like you did with our class.
Right.
Is that you see the tape, you have to make a decision.
Sure, that's exactly right.
You
Thank
don't
you.
know the story
Thank you.
beforehand.
Yeah. See, he has the news director. He has 45 minutes to make a decision, there's some things he knows he cannot say. I mean, he knows who shot, but he hasn't been charged. He knows that the father has shot the guy, but he hasn't been charged, and he cannot. I mean, he's up for libel, which is a legal sort of thing here, if he presents that and he's wrong. But still, it's a big story. It's a big story because this guy was charged with kidnapping coming in, and it was done. And they're only one, and you're not going to wait till the next morning. See, the things is even then you're not going to wait till the next morning. Today we have 24-hour news, and it's like fun is like that. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Even though the guy got shot, was he guilty?
One more time. I'm sorry.
Even though the guy was killed, was he guilty?
Oh, well, yeah, it was pretty clear that he was guilty of. He sexually assaulted the boy.
If I was a boy's father, I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah, that's
Because a lot of people
I
would.
was going to say, because you don't
But
know the facts.
again, you got to remember this. My ethicist is getting out here, okay? You got to remember this, is that just because the guy did it doesn't mean that he deserved to die. That's not justice.
If I was a boy's
That's
father,
not.
that would ruin my child's life.
I'll let you work through that, but you work through the ethics. That's not justice.
Yeah, but my kid would have to wake up and dream about that every day of his life.
Still not justice. Still not justice.
I would just tie it to a tree and let him.
But that's a bigger question that I have to go.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis.
You're welcome. Sorry about the rush.
No worries. I'm going to chew upon to figure out how to play the two videos together, and we're going to go from there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good luck. I was trying to middle and right, just left.